Welcome to another episode of TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stassja and this is Ange. Hi, Ange.
Hi, Stass.
It's been an interesting week for us, or at least Tuesday was very interesting.
It was, yes.
So we and a lot of other women went along to this Melbourne Uni event titled Pride and Prejudice in Policy. What can our public institutions learn from the UK's Stonewall controversy? The event itself was pretty good.
It wasn't long enough and it wasn't in-depth enough, but the people who did speak mostly were fantastic.
Yep. So who did speak? Well, Kathleen Stock. There were three people from the UK that did pre-recorded presentations. Mm-hmm. Kathleen Stock, very measured. Finn, someone called herself a radical feminist, but then said that gender-critical feminists are in bed with far-right extremists. Naomi Cunningham, so she was the woman who did the initial Freedom of Information requests in the UK regarding various organisations' involvement with Stonewall's diversity champion scheme. And then John Fain was the moderator. He's a ABC radio host, very well known. He was
a last minute inclusion because the original moderator pulled out. We assume it's because of backlash from the trans community.
He was pretty biased. I thought it was pretty obvious. Maybe I'm being biased by saying
no. There was one trans identified individual speaking, Julie, and he was just gushing, and it was just a little bit cringeworthy actually. So it wasn't just you, we were all just sitting there going, and just kept going on about how her lived experience trumps anything else that was said today, and but you've lived this life, everything kind of stuff, and we're there going, oh, okay.
Yeah, so Julie, I can't remember his surname, but he actually works as an archivist at the ABC. So
poor Julie was completely out of their depth. Julie was called in the last minute after Sally Hines pulled out, and they were completely out of their depth. But I kind of respect them for having the guts to turn up, because other people didn't. The representative from ACON didn't have the guts to turn up, pulled out at the last minute, and Sally Hines pulled out at the last minute too. Yeah. So now good on Julie for actually showing up and, talking. So
Cordelia Fine, she introduced the whole event. I think she must have been the main organizer. She read out what the ACON person said about why they withdrew, and it was all this bullshit about the event is going to be unsafe, and like the complete opposite is true. There were trans activists out the front of the doors, so when I was lining up to go in, they come up and try and hand me a pamphlet. The pamphlet, where is it, was entitled Should Fascists Join Arms with Their Feminazi Sisters to End Wokeness? It was just ridiculous. And someone on Twitter claimed that pamphlet was satire, but that saying, many a truth said in jest. They specifically targeted, and I'm quoting from the pamphlet, white bourgeois lesbian cis women. So they're going after lesbians. Like, it's just fucking homophobic.
Mm-hmm. I was quite offended nobody offered me a pamphlet. Did they know I was a TERF?
I think they rocked up a little bit late. So, did you see them out the front? Or were you?
Yeah, and no, they were all in other people's faces, but they avoided me for some reason. I don't know why.
So as Cordelia Fine is introducing the event, there's these latecomers showing up, and the doors would open, and all you could hear is these crazy trans activists screaming fascist and feminazi. What's that?
Swearing. You could hear them swearing.
Yeah.
you know, TERFs and stuff like that. It was just embarrassing for their side.
And then there was this really funny moment where Cordelia was saying, she was saying either something about people in this debate screaming at each other or slurring each other. And just as she said it, the doors opened to let someone in. And all you can hear is fucking fascists and all this. And the whole audience laughed. It was pretty good. But I gotta say, the highlight was Mr. Alan Davison. He kicked ass.
He did.
He got the most cheers out of anyone.
He was very measured. I was so impressed with how measured he was.
Yeah.
He said a lot while saying very little. And I'm sure if he was able to let it rip, we would have been on our feet and he would have got a standing ovation, but he wasn't able to. And he was, you know, out of respect for some of the other people there, that was probably not appropriate. So no, he was very, very good, very to the point.
So Alan, for those who don't know, he's the dean of, I'm so sorry, Alan, if you're watching, of a faculty, I can't remember which faculty. Arts. Yeah. Okay, thank you. At the University of Technology, Sydney. And he's also involved with an organisation called Heterodox Academy, which originated in the US. I think Alan might be the country contact here in Australia. So if you're an academic and you are alarmed at the lack of viewpoint diversity in universities in Australia, get in touch with Heterodox Academy online and see what we can do about it here in Australia. But the two best moments from Alan for me was when John Fane started crapping on about, but you know, doesn't it concern you that your movement aligns with far-right extremists, blah blah blah. And Alan came back with this excellent description of, well, when good people in the middle do not speak up, then you get this extremism going on. A vacuum is created and there will be far right nut jobs that come in to fill that vacuum. Exactly. So what we need is people in the middle to start speaking up. Mm-hmm. Spot on. He got a big cheer for that one. Mm-hmm. And the other point, which I can't remember exactly how it went, but John Fane asked Alan some question about blah blah blah, but doesn't that cause harm to the transgender community? And Alan came back with something like advocacy organizations such as ACON do not have a monopoly on claims of harm. And the whole audience cheered. I yelled out, sex matters. And because, you know, women are being harmed by this bullshit.
And minority women too, you know, women from other cultures impacted by sex self-ID, things like that. Women who are in prison, women who are accessing crisis support for homelessness, domestic violence and rape, they're all severely impacted and severely marginalised. So, yeah, you know, the trans women are not the most marginalised, inverted commas, women at all. They're privileged men.
Absolutely. Well said. And then there was Linda Gale.
Yeah.
Look, you could tell she was being very careful around how she was choosing her words, which is understandable because she's been in the spotlight for she was elected Greens convener here in Victoria and then got, you know, booted out of that position like the next day or something stupid, all based on 2 or 3 years ago she co-authored a paper for the Greens responding to, you know, crazy transgender demands within the Greens to It's just complete overreach from the trans activists in the Greens Party. And, you know, she describes briefly her experience with all of that. And towards the end, she said what she realized through all of that was that the definition of transphobia has changed from meaning someone who hates trans people and wishes them harm or wishes them to just disappear. And it has changed to mean anyone who disagrees with their worldview. And that got a really big cheer from the audience as well, which was great.
See, the treatment of Linda kind of mirrored the treatment of J.K. Rowling in that they wrote a perfectly reasonable thing, questioning, you know, how this impacts on women and children. And that was considered transphobia. But anyone who actually read it, which most of the men in the Greens who were advocating for her demise hadn't read it. You know, if people actually read it, they would think, well, that's reasonable. You know, this stuff does impact on women, does impact on kids. But nobody actually read it, but they just, you know, get on the transphobia bandwagon. If one trans person doesn't like what it says, and then they get piled on, not just by the trans movement, but by all the men in positions of power in these political parties, piling on them. So, you know, the vitriol directed towards Linda was led by men on Twitter. In the Greens. Right. And then the response to the letter that was written, because Nina Valens was also involved with that. If you go back to our interview with Nina, she talks about it in more depth. If you go back and read it, it's not, you know, transphobia at all. It's perfectly reasonable questions that you would ask a political party that is advocating for one group of people over another. Yep.
So, yeah, so look, that was the event. It is going to be broadcast allegedly on ABC Radio National's Big Ideas program at some point. We don't know which date, and they're actually going to edit it to get it down to 1 hour. So we'll see how that turns out. But the night got very interesting because a large group of us went out to a pub for dinner and drinks afterwards. And
we walked from the venue for about 3 kilometres through the bowels of Melbourne Uni, through all these different tracks and, you know, trails to a pub.
Tell me what you saw, and then I'll tell you what I saw.
What did I see? Well, we walked to the pub through the tracks and trails, and we went inside and we all found a seat around a great big table, and there was another little table over there. And we ordered our meals. And as we were waiting for our meals to come, we're all chatting amongst each other, moving around the table. There's, 90% women. Yeah. And we were all just talking and whatever, usual stuff, but women from different backgrounds, but mostly older women, 40 plus, 50 plus, a few in their 70s. And yeah, we're all having a great chat. And then I looked up because I was facing the door and I saw these people in face masks rushing towards our table and one standing back and filming. And then I saw them come at our table holding something and start throwing it on the table, but coming between us as we were all sitting there and throwing this thing. And I thought, what the hell? And I said, oh, look, we've got company, as they were walking towards us, because I realized straight away it was trans rights activists. And and then I saw women just jump out of their seats because it was actually really quite intimidating to have someone run into the back of the pub, through the pub, filming, and then throw things at us. We didn't know what they were. They were those pamphlets accusing us of being in bed with the far right. But they got in our physical space, and I don't know about anyone else. If someone gets in your physical space, the natural response is to fight back. And women jumped out of their seats. And one of these activists ran around the other side of the table because there was a fireplace behind us dividing the table, ran around the other side of the table. But women had stood up from that end of the table and intercepted them and grabbed their hand because they were trying to throw things on the table, and a scuffle broke out. Yeah. And I'm talking a scuffle between 3 trans rights activists in face masks, looking quite intimidating, and they were hyped up. Like, I've been an activist for a long time, and one of the first things they teach you in activist school is to stay calm. They came in juiced up, adrenalized, and looking for confrontation. So the energy was all off, and it was a threatening energy. And women, obviously scared for their own safety, responded with, right, stop, enough, get the hell out of here. They'd elbowed people in the head and things like that as they were throwing this thing, because they weren't thinking straight, because they were juiced up on adrenaline. Women at the other end of the table, because they came around the fireplace, restrained one of them. And then they all started to panic and started throwing, there's punches thrown and whatever. And I saw one woman got pushed, and she was an elderly woman. I saw her, sort of retaliate, and it got quite ugly. But what I saw looking at it was a couple of young people run in aggressively, a couple of older people restrain them, and then attempt to physically remove them, like you would if you're a security guard.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw. I didn't see, women, being aggressive. I saw them responding to an aggressive threat with, that was potentially a serious threat, that with, by grabbing these people and physically throwing them out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And, and I saw elderly women get pushed. I heard people calling us, fascist Nazi TERF scum at the tops of their voices in a public place, toward a group of, older women minding their own business, enjoying, a drink and waiting for our dinner to be served. So it was just a horrible, horrible thing. But they just, they've got no idea how to be activists. They honestly don't. These kids,
they're in a cult.
I think they're misguided, and I think that their community online doesn't translate well to real life. And these kids, I don't think they're mentally well, and I think they think they're doing something really noble, but they're actually doing something really dangerous.
Absolutely.
All
right, I'll tell you what I saw. So I was sitting at the other table because we had so many women, we hadn't booked enough seats. So I was at this smaller table, and I had my back to everything that was happening. So by the time I realized, some shit's going down, and look over my shoulder, I see two women. I thought they were women. I've since been told one of them could have potentially actually been a man, like in this clinch. Like they were locked and neither of them could get away from each other. And I stood up and I was ready to go and intervene. And then I realized I didn't know which one was one of ours and which one was one of the others. So I was like, oh shit, I don't want to hurt one of ours or, manhandle the wrong person. So I just sort of stepped back and just watched this unfold. And we were sort of near the door to the kitchen, and one of the kitchen staff, this man's come out. He doesn't know what the fuck's going on. And he's just yelling, stop that. And at this point, Jessica was screaming very loudly, get the fuck out, just over and over again at the top of her lungs, which I thought was a really good intimidation tactic to scare the shit out of them. And then you said you saw an old lady get pushed. So she's 64 years old and she does have a physical disability. She had to drive from the venue to get to the pub because she couldn't walk that distance. And she sort of had her back to the wall, and there's a trans activist directly in front of her. And then I just see them like pushing back and forth. And from what I understand, I didn't see this, but I was told this afterwards, like a number of the women just started shoving them, just pushing them. And while Jess is yelling, get the fuck out. And then it was all over. Crazy. Absolutely.
Which I see.
Pardon?
The thing I found really disturbing is that they had followed us through the bowels of Melbourne Uni for 3 kilometres from the venue. They had waited from the venue.
Well, we don't know that. Here's the other thing. I was standing out the front of the venue, like yelling from 3 meters away to a bunch of women saying, "We're going to Norton." So So it's quite possible.
They might have heard you.
Quite possible it was my fault. Or the other possibility is it just was a coincidence that they were there and they recognized us and they decided to do that. Because the bar staff said that this group had been sitting out the front drinking beers for the last hour before they decided to come up and have a go at us.
Doing that drunk? That is ridiculous. I imagine they'd be drunk on half a beer, but no, it was just, those kids were so out of their depth. Yeah. You know, most of us in that group had been, you know, we've been alive 3 times longer than them. And we've been protesting since their mums were born. Yeah. So, you know, they were completely out of their depth. They did not expect us to fight back at all. They thought we'd be like, oh no, little kids are attacking us.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I the next morning I hopped on Twitter because someone posted the thing that someone was saying, oh yeah, I was at the venue last night. Ha ha ha. We took it to the TERFs, and I hopped on there and said, yeah, you're going to show the video because cops want it. And within seconds, I was blocked, and all of their friends blocked me too because I sort of implied to them that if they're going to show that video around, that it's going to implicate them, and that we will use that to identify them. So.
Well, I can say that one of our women who tried to intervene to break it up, she ended up with scratches and bruises, and she went to the police yesterday and made a full report. The police are taking it seriously, and they even said they were going to approach the pub and ask them for security footage.
Excellent.
I rang the pub and asked for the security footage and was given the runaround. First it was, oh no, there's no cameras in that section of the pub. Yeah. I was like, okay, but they were sitting out the front for like an hour prior. Do you have cameras out the front? And this woman on the end of the phone, she hesitated and then was like, no, we don't have that footage. And I was just like, you're lying. So anyway, I hope the cops get to the bottom of that. And the other thing is that pamphlet that they handed out is just so offensive. And, you know, calling us white supremacists and all this crazy shit. Like, I am going to start calling that far left extremism is what we experienced on Tuesday night. And the woman who made the report to the police said this needs to go to ASIO as well, because
they're dangerous.
They are becoming like a fucking domestic terrorist organization.
That's the second assault. Yeah, the second assault in 2 weeks by trans activists on gender critical women.
Yeah. The other comparison I would like to make is, because I've been interested in Scientology lately, is this is what Scientologists do. If you are an enemy of the Church of Scientology, it triggers a policy called fair game, where the enemy of Scientology becomes fair game, and you can use any tactics you can think of to destroy that person, to get them fired from their job. They send private investigators out to monitor what you're doing, what you're wearing, where you're going. They will show up at your door with cameras and provoke you until you react. And then they've got it on camera that you hit someone and you get charged with assault. This is exactly the same shit. It's cult behavior.
It is. It is. Just all ridiculous. Right. Ridiculous.
On that note.
It's not going to stop us.
It's not. Our guest has just arrived, so I'm going to bring her in. We have joining us today a lecturer from Melbourne Uni, good friend of Holly Lawford-Smith's, Kate Fallon. Hi, Kate. Welcome.
Hi, Kate. Stassja. Hi, Angie. How you going?
Good. Now, tell us, can you just introduce yourself for our viewers who might not know you?
Well, my name's Kate. I'm a lecturer in the School of Global Urban and Social Studies at RMIT. I'm not sure that there's anything else much interesting to say about me.
Okay, well, you went to an event on Tuesday night, is that right?
Yeah.
So what was that about, and who was presenting?
It was a celebration of Julia Gillard's misogyny speech, or it marked the 10-year anniversary, which I was a little bit stunned to hear, like, has it been 10 years?
Yeah.
So Julia, it was at Hamer Hall, and Julia Gillard was she was speaking, and it was she spoke not that much, actually. She opened the event, and she said a little bit about how the speech came about, and that itself was interesting. And then she was followed by a series of speakers, I think 6, and Kate Miller-Heidke doing some music in between.
Yeah.
And I guess it was like a whole range of speakers talking about really what the speech meant to them.
And was one of the speakers our very own Jazz Jennings, Georgie Stone?
Georgie was one of the speakers. There were 6. So which were, and that was good. It was good to have quite a few, I think. And I guess, they aimed for a range, in some way. I'm not sure exactly what way, I was thinking about that after.
Right.
They had it, and it wasn't just women. They also had Mike Bowers, the photojournalist, open it.
Right.
And he's photographed Julia Gillard her whole career. So I thought that was quite a nice touch.
Right.
It was interesting in lots of, it was interesting in lots of ways. Georgie's speech was interesting too, but there are other things to, I think I approach these, are you like this? I think I approach these events now, public, political or feminist events now, as a bit of an outsider, and so with some reservation. Yeah, is it the same for you?
Yeah.
Wow. I assume they're going to be liberal feminist events where, people with my kind of views aren't going to be represented. That they're going to be quite, I always assume that they're going to be quite mainstream.
Yeah.
And that they will inevitably platform men.
Mm. Yeah, or mainstream. It's also, though, that they will assume that everyone there shares their view, I think, too. Mm. Like, it would bother me, okay, if all of you have the same view. That's one thing, but to talk as though you're just preaching to the choir is another thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But then again, like, maybe that's a bit unfair because it was, it was the anniversary and it was a celebration. So maybe it's okay that the tone was one of adulation. Mm. I guess, do you remember the context of the speech?
It was in response to Tony Abbott being a dickhead, wasn't it?
Well, yes, but that was in response to Peter Slipper. So Peter Slipper, the speaker, had been caught out sending these, Angie, do you remember, had been caught out sending these sexual and misogynistic, just in this sort of textbook definition, sense of the term, texts to his staffer. I can't recall the staffer's name, but, like texts that liken women's genitals to seafood and things like that.
Yeah. So,
of course, Labor didn't, because Peter Slipper was a Liberal speaker, Labor wanted to keep him as, Labor wanted to keep him as the speaker. Right. So Julia Gillard she was standing by him in a sense, and Tony Abbott was calling her a misogynist for standing by a misogynist. And so there was, I think you could say that there was something, maybe calculated is a bit strong, but the speech was definitely political in a dual, or more than the sense of feminist, right? Mm. Like, she was doing something good for the Labor Party. And that whole context was elided.
Right.
Which I just thought was interesting. Even Julia Gillard she said the speech was spontaneous. Oh. Yes, because she said she didn't know Tony Abbott was going to do what he did, and she was just responding to that. So she started writing some notes while he was talking, and then she decided to take the response and give what looked like a speech, right? But wasn't planned.
Wow.
Okay, that's impressive.
I had no idea that it all sort of just happened on the spot. Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Good on her.
I know. Yeah, I know. So that was, yeah, I was quite struck by that too. But, you know, I'm reading a lot of historiography at the moment, so I'm also paying attention to the history being written. And I was like, I wonder how true that is, that it was this, because this is how it was cast on the night, right? It was this like feminist achievement. It was a spontaneous expression of her pent up frustration at having suffered what she had, you know, for so long. But yeah, I was like, I wonder how, I just think an alternative history could be written there, right? Given that it was in the interest of the Labor Party.
And also considering some of the really awful things she did for women while she was in office as well.
Yes.
She's been lauded as a feminist on the basis of that speech alone.
Yes.
But when you look back at the things that she did and the impact that that's had on women, particularly marginalised women.
Single mothers.
You know,
and I think there have been a couple of articles about that just around the event recently, which have been good to see. Yeah, Angie, I agree. I was thinking about that too. Like all of this, it just wasn't considered at all. So I just was sort of, I was just thinking about this and was trying to work out what it tells us. Like, what is it? Yeah, and do we value the word more than the deed now? And I'm not saying the speech wasn't an achievement. I think it was. I think to see a woman deliver a speech, it was more the form than the content too. I think she was like, it was quite spectacular. You know, she didn't.
He's such a slime ball too, Tony Abbott, and he'd just come out of that scandal where that guy thought that he was his illegitimate son, and you know, Tony Abbott was just like, with people looking at him going, why has this guy's got so much influence? So it was just perfectly timed too, because people were just looking at Tony Abbott going, no.
Yeah. And I think you're right about the timing and the context. And actually, it was Julia spoke about this. She said, I can't think of quite how this came up. Maybe like other women approaching her and saying, I wish I could do that or something. And she was really clear that the context is so particular. Like she was in Parliament, right? That has its own, it is its own institution with its own sort of, I don't know, rites and rituals and rhythms. You know, she made the point that you would seem really eccentric if you were to do something so dramatic. It's very dramatic. But it was I just thought that was interesting, like that she was so clued into the sort of specificity of the context, because in a way that I think some of the speakers, or just maybe some of her fans more broadly, aren't.
Well, so tell us, how did Georgie Stone go? Was he like sort of out of place? Did it seem weird? Did he do a good job?
So not out of place, because it was there was sort of a real range of speakers. You know, as I said, Mike Bowers started, and there were like different different ages, different professions. Yeah. So I think in a sense it was real variety. Georgie's there was a way in which Georgie's was similar to some of the other speeches. I can't quite work out how to articulate this. It's something like the language feels inapt now. So Georgie was saying things like, you know, when I was little, I was told to sit down and be quiet and don't take up space. And, you know, these are all the things, I guess, that, you know, feminists have been saying for decades that you know, women are told, right? Like, be small. I guess it feels like language I don't mean it's out of date exactly now, but it feels like it's from a different time. So it just didn't ring true. And I guess there's a couple of dimensions to it not ringing true for me, right? Like the one is just, I'm not sure it would ring true almost from any woman to me now. Maybe I'm like, I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of like sexism from me. I'm not sure. Because I'm not saying the problems aren't there, but I just think we've got our own moment, don't we? And maybe we need to work out our own response to that, and not to be like hauling up language from previous eras. But then I guess there's also that Georgie is a trans woman. So I was like, is that, I mean, I wonder, you know, were you like, I suppose, yeah, is that how you were treated? Were all those things said to you? You know, maybe Georgie wasn't saying they were said, they were just like, you know, that you made to feel that way.
Yeah.
It just feels contrived. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Stassja.
I was going to say, and I wonder if it's if it was to do with him being perceived as female, or whether it was because people knew that he's trans, and maybe that is something that trans people face. I don't know.
No, yeah.
Wasn't he school captain? Like, you know,
yeah.
To me, school captain and you know, neighbour star doesn't really sound like someone who was told to just be quiet.
Yeah,
you know, that's someone who's brought up with some confidence.
I guess it sounded like Georgie was talking about being really little. And maybe both things could be true. Like, it's true that Julia Gillard was PM, and yet I suppose, you know, she wasn't told to be quiet, was she? But, you know, sometimes having like a formal, well, I guess that's what I'm saying, right? Like, being in a formal position of power doesn't immunize you, or, you know, against some of this stuff. But yes, Stassja, I think you make a good point. Like, I wondered that too. That's right. Maybe Georgie really was being told to be quiet, but for different reasons. And then what you've got is, I guess, like a novel, or or just a different form of discrimination, if you want to put it that way, going on.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. That's right. Are we conflating different things here?
Yeah. So, Kate, what was your peak trans moment? How did you come to realize that there was some really serious problems with the transgender movement conflicting with women's rights? Like, when did it come up for you?
Look, I don't know that it came up as such. I think, I was thinking about this recently. I think I'm really influenced by certain radical feminist thinkers. You know, like maybe Kate Millett would be one of them. And I think those radical feminist theorists, they really talked in terms of class. So for like quite a few years now, this is how I've thought about gender or sex, both of them, as class. So I just have had a hard time. But, you know, for a little while, I was trying to work out how can I reconcile this with the class analysis? How can I bring them into harmony? I'm not sure maybe I haven't totally abandoned that project, but perhaps, maybe then I don't, you could, when you can start to see the politics of the movement too, maybe, and it gets a little bit more overtly misogynist, maybe then I started to give up that project a little bit.
And how has it impacted you as, you know, an academic? Because like the universities just seem so captured by all of this. What's it been like being, you know, sort of the outsider at work?
Well, it's true that you feel, or, you know, you feel like one. It's hard. Sometimes I like to think that maybe there's a lot of us who feel like that.
I think there is.
Angie, what makes you say that?
Because some of them are in my inbox.
Oh, yes.
There's quite a few academics that go, I agree with you, but I can't say anything at work, from various different universities, you know. There's a lot of people who are critical thinkers, who are not transphobes, but are deeply concerned about the way this movement's impacting on our society, and particularly on children.
Yeah, that's right. I think there are a few people and coming at it from different directions, right? Like, I think there are plenty of people who are worried, maybe not for feminist reasons as well. You know, I guess how do I feel at uni or at work? I suppose, you know, sometimes I feel it's I think we're not exposing students enough to contrary views. And then I think of like, what do we expect? Must be such a shock, or it's no wonder then that they encounter our views or questions as abhorrent. You know, they've just had this sort of beaten into them. So I think that's mostly how I feel. It's a shame that we can't talk about this.
I was I just mentioned before the Heterodox Academy. Have you heard of that?
Is there such a thing?
Yeah, so it originated in the US, and I'm pretty sure Alan Davison is the country contact here in Australia. And, you know, their mission statement, their values, it's all about viewpoint diversity and cultivating that within universities.
Yeah.
Might be worth reaching out to them.
Yeah, I'll have a look.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess is this part of the trouble? I feel like no one objects to heterodoxy, right? It's like, yeah, the people who disagree with us wouldn't say that they object to it or that they object to different views. They just object to ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or ours are just beyond the pale, or they're harmful, or what have you.
Bigotry.
Yeah. I was thinking about this at the event the other night too, because you know, I suppose the theme became, actually, I want to know what you think about this language, but the theme became, as you can imagine, about the significance of calling out, and not just sexism, also other injustice. But I guess I had two thoughts. One, I don't like that language of call out, and I don't think that's exactly what Julia Gillard, I think it's an injustice to her to say that's what she was doing. And the other thing is, of course, like, it's not, I mean, they just mean call out about the things that we want called out, or the things that we agree with, right? Not like, yeah, good, everyone go and call out injustices as you perceive them. So there's just something dishonest there too.
I think also you got to pick your battles, you know, because there's so much injustice. It's like, some of it's just that cannot be bothered, and other stuff is like, right.
Yeah.
Well, have you had any sort of negative experiences with students or other staff specifically around your gender critical views? Or Holly, does Holly cop all that? And you
look, Holly certainly cops most of it, goodness. You know, she really does. She does a great job. I haven't with students, or certainly, or not directly, but I'm also not teaching gender, so there's less chance for it to come up, I suppose. Yeah.
Did you consider doing gender studies at any point?
I didn't. You know, I studied English literature in my undergrad, and I have to say, I don't know what it was, but I just always, I did know I wanted to steer clear of it. And actually, look, Sheila Jeffries was teaching then, right? So some of it would have been fantastic. I think early on I had an experience in some of my lit class of some students doing it, and I thought that's not for me.
Yeah.
Right.
But they would have been, well, then I guess it was that they would have been third wave feminists, and I just couldn't make sense of that, just intuitively, I suppose.
So were they like reading 18th century literature through the lens of
queer theory?
in intersectional feminism?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure that they were reading the 18th century literature for a start. But yeah, just like, that's right, they would bring these perspectives to bear. I suppose, maybe sex positivity and things like that. And I just had not encountered any of it, and it just didn't seem very helpful to me. Maybe just like given my experiences, or so then it was only when through my lit studies, I encountered Kate Millett, and that just opened my eyes.
Great.
Yeah.
Mine was is it Naomi Wolf, The Beauty Myth? That was what got me. Like, how old I was, like 18 or 19 when I read that, and that just opened my eyes to it all. And I remember I had this job when I was about 20, working for this insurance broker, where I was 20. There was another woman who was about 30, and everyone else that worked there was one was in her 50s, and the three others were all in their like 70s. And like just the sex roles in the office, like there was a husband and wife working there, and you know, she would go and get her hair done once a week, and she did the accounts and she did the dishes, and it was like,
Could you see all that then?
yeah, I could, yeah. And I put part of that down to having read The Beauty Myth.
Yeah. So
Which-
maybe we should give liberal feminists an easier time.
What do you?
Well, she's a liberal feminist, isn't she?
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
That's what I was actually studying women's studies when The Beauty Myth came out.
Right.
And we picked the shit out of it as the beginning of liberal feminism and not real feminism.
Elaborate. Well, because she was telling, but she was, I guess she was still critical of some norms applied to women, right?
Yeah, and you know, at that time, you know, separatism was popular still. I was at the end of the second wave, and it's a bit like now, where I find that there's you know, extremists even within the gender critical movement, where it's like, you will never call them a trans woman, they should not use the word woman, and you know, there's like these demands on language that are placed on all of us. And it was the same back then regards to, you know, radical feminism and liberal feminism, where you had to draw a very, very, very firm line. And it's the same difference between radical feminism now and gender critical, where, you know, you are either on that side or you are on this side. So, you know, I can't remember. I mean, I read The Beauty Myth in the early 90s, or whenever it came out, 1990 or something. I don't know, something ridiculous. Yeah, but I just remember that the women that I looked to were quite critical of it. I'll have to read it again. I'll probably laugh. And I probably became the cliche because I wear makeup, you know. I'm still a feminist.
Yeah. I guess she was just drawing attention to things that had escaped it. Yeah, and
it brought average women into feminism, and this is what gender critical movement has done now too. There used to be, like, there's still this thing that to be a feminist you've got to have shaved head, hairy armpits, no makeup, and be a lesbian. You know, there's still a perception in society that to be a real feminist, that's who you have to be. And you know, even after 30 years,
sometimes I think it's the opposite, and feminist just no longer has any meaning. You can have any set of beliefs and declare yourself a feminist.
Yeah, I guess that we think that way, but the average person who says, "Oh, I'm not a feminist," considers them a radical extremist.
Are there many of those people left?
Yeah, there are. There are a lot of people that would say would never call themselves a feminist.
Yeah,
and the ones who would call themselves a feminist are usually sex positive and pro-trans. So,
it's quite a mess.
It is a mess.
But I guess, we also want heterodoxy, right? So
See, when I was young, when I was the age of those little extremists that came in to bash us, I was in the Australian skeptics, I was in the Australian atheists, and, you know, we were meeting in dark church halls and things, because that was, you know, when computers had only just come out. You know, we didn't even have email, you know, and we'd write letters, and you'd pay your $3 and they'd send you this big, you know, piece of paper with all the things that you should be concerned about. You know, it was so we were always questioning. You know, there was this thing about questioning the status quo, questioning what the government's up to, questioning what, you know, big business is up to, whereas these kids just seem to be fed a script.
Yeah, you know, it was, I mean, perhaps we don't all have our own versions of that, but that's a little bit how I felt the other night, that I was listening to a script on repeat. Again, it's really harsh of me, because we only have, like, I think, you know, what I think might be going on partly is that this language is corporate now, right? Like, language of call out, that's corporate. I think my students, it's in their, like, student statement of conduct or whatever, that they should call out injustice when they see it. You know, so like inclusivity, all talk of justice too, right? So just how is that supposed? How can that be both the language of corporations and the language of a movement?
It's co-opted.
Yeah, and I think too. Oh, sorry, Stass. In schools, you know, kids are being empowered to call out even their own parents, call out teachers, and that is sold to them under the pretense of that it is emboldening them, it's making them more
Confident.
confident and things
And they're
like
being
that.
and they're being courageous.
Yeah,
when there's absolutely nothing at stake, right?
Yeah, and
All you get is credit.
Yeah, and it's disempowering their parents, teachers, and anyone who can teach them how to be a responsible adult. Because they're just being told to say no, stuff you.
Yeah, and and probably disempowering them to be able to like dialogue it out, right, or have the debate, or
they're not used to not getting their own way.
Yeah, because call it out doesn't mean like talk about it. It means, and it kind of has this like implication, like you've got your audience around you, and you're all just you're going to shame that person.
Yeah, big time. So much shaming going on in with all of this. Kate, we're going to have to wrap it up there, but thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for filling us in on the Julia Gillard event. I'm going to have to read up on it now.
I think you can. Yeah, you can watch it. Yeah.
Cool.
You know, I do really admire her, and she was probably the only one who talked about concrete things too. Wow. You know, like women's education.
Wow.
Yeah. I'd love to put her on the spot about why she made those decisions that have had.
Yes. Well, I just thought it was a bit of a shame, right? That she wasn't challenged at all, and she can handle that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see her in the street, I'll do it.
Yeah. let me know.
Cheers, Kate.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kate.
Keep in touch.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, sounds like her event was less eventful than ours.
Oh, see, this silly little trans activists have just sort of, played into my plans because, I want to show people what we're up against.
Yeah.
And, I keep saying, these people are aggressive, these people are unhinged, these people are dangerous. We're just women who are trying to defend our rights, and we're being called these things and being attacked. People go, oh, that's bullshit. And it's like, well, no, it's not, clearly. 2 police reports have been made in the last fortnight,
True. Yeah. Okay, on to more news. So just yesterday overnight, this story has broken about a trans-identified male who goes by the name Rachel Queen Burton, who is he's been arrested. He's on remand at the moment for 8 child abuse offences, ranging from gross indecency to directing a person to sexually manipulate him and producing child exploitation material. So this guy has been using TikTok. He's got 36,000 followers on TikTok. It would be interesting to know what the age range of those followers is. And on TikTok, in his description, he describes himself as a proud trans woman who is living my best life.
And can you guess what journalist described him as this morning? A woman, not a trans woman. A woman has been charged with sex offences. A South Australian TikToker. A woman has been charged. Yeah. So we hopped onto Twitter and reminded the journalist that it is dishonest and disrespectful to claim men are women and to attribute their violent sexual crimes to us.
Absolutely.
So that's the second one in 2 weeks that where these men have been described as female, and if you were reading the article that you would imagine they were talking about a woman.
Yeah. So the other one was the ACT guy, is that? Yeah. So the ACT man, he sexually abused his 2 little sisters over the course of years and is now facing 72 charges. So there's just this ongoing issue of child abusers coming from the transgender movement, and mermaids this week. My God, one of their trustees is given a presentation at a bloody pedophile conference.
Yeah, and I was calling out that Australian group -18 because they're running running groups for 12 to 25-year-olds to celebrate queerness. And, you know, as a mother of kids around 12 years old, I would not want them anywhere near 25-year-old adults talking about sexual concepts. And, you know, this agency in -18, you know, specifically targets 12 to 25-year-olds, and they run these things all over the country. Now, red flags, red flags, red flags, as far as I'm concerned. And that's, you know, and that's, they're advertising that crap at the same week that Mermaids in the UK has been found to have dodgy people in it. So
isn't Headspace involved with that as well?
Yeah, Headspace, -18, all of those state government funded and federally funded groups have LGBTQ sections, you know, but the -18 is LGBTQ plus specific, whereas Headspace, you know, sends kids to they have their own groups, but they also incorporate -18 activities for the LGBTQ plus kids. But I know many parents who've sent their kids off to Headspace for counselling for, you know, issues at home and school, their kids have come home and had questions about gender identity and said, you know, maybe I'm a woman or whatever. So, you know, I've been contacted by parents who believe that Headspace has been grooming their kids, and they're not qualified, they're not psychiatrists and psychologists, these people, you know. The mental health services that are applied for youth are counsellors. There's no you know, like there's no qualification for a counsellor, really. You can do a diploma or something, but
it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. But that, like, the failure of safeguarding, to not see a problem with 25-year-old trans women with all their kinks hanging out with freaking 12-year-olds, like,
exactly,
it's mind-blowingly stupid.
It is, and this is all government funded stuff. This is all, you know, all held at the Pride Centre kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Well, shout out to Women's Action Alliance Canberra. They held a protest last week out the front of the Magistrates Court against that ACT man who the judge gave him bail because she was shocked that he might be held in a men's prison. That was the child abuser one, the one that molested his two little sisters. So well done, Women's Action Alliance Canberra. Thank you.
They've also made some resources that you can print out and stick under people's windscreen wipers, or they've made stickers and all sorts of stuff.
I linked to that last week.
Yeah. Yep. They're really good.
I also would like to let everyone know that there is an online event which is actually started at 5 o'clock today, Friday. It's called Decentering Mothers on the Politics of Sex. And we've got the wonderful Millie Hill from the UK speaking, Petra Buskins, I think it's pronounced, Stella O'Malley, Anna Kerr from Feminist Legal Clinic, and Carleen Gribble, who has previously written an academic paper around the importance of female-centered language in stuff like childbirth. But they have a second session on tomorrow, which starts at midday and goes till 7 p.m. I will put a link in the description to the event. You can still get, they have a promotion going for late tickets. So just use the code MOTHER and you will get the ticket for the fair price of $40. So that looks interesting. The other thing that's coming up is Anna McCormack from International Women's Day Brisbane Meanjin is putting on a public event to raise awareness about the impending sex self-ID laws up in Queensland. She's also doing a little fundraiser. So the event is free to attend, but it would be nice if you're going to just contribute some money. So I'll put a link to both the event and the fundraiser in the description.
Yep, I put $20 in, go towards some whatever Anna's doing, because they're a great little group of activists up there. Fantastic.
I did too. Yeah. Congratulations to Tatum Street, who I think this was her first article She got published in The Spectator. She did an excellent piece about woke misogyny, pretty much, and the media, and Anthony Albanese fawning all over fucking Dean Danny Laidley. It was well done, and I really encourage women to have a go, and men, have a go, write something. If the big newspapers don't publish it, try The Spectator. Every bit counts.
Or just publish it yourself on your own Twitter or something.
Yep.
Because people sharing it, you can get quite, it can go pretty far. Edie Wright started off just self-publishing.
Yep. Louise Elliott has been in the news this week. So she's in Hobart. She's running to join the Hobart City Council. She's lovely. I met her when I was in Hobart. I met her in Hobart earlier this year. Anyway, some freaking trans activist has hung on to this piece of damning information about Louise Elliott until now, just before the council elections. They've gone to the fucking ABC has chosen to run with this story, in which Louise Elliott had some heated back and forth emails with a non-binary councillor who I suspect is Jax Fox.
It is Jax.
And Louise Elliott said she identifies as a frog and signed off as ribbit. So
imagine the ABC publishing that. That's an article. The ABC go, oh, that's breaking news with everything that's going on in the world. The ABC got to get their ACON points.
That's right. The funniest bit in there for me was so the councillor, who they didn't name but we're pretty sure is Jax Fox, said, oh, it shows that Louise Elliott just doesn't understand trans and non-binary issues. It's like, she perfectly understands, and she thinks it's bullshit like the rest of the population thinks it's bullshit.
Did they demand she goes to a re-education camp or?
Oh, mate.
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting week, just with people comparing us to Nazis. Like Jane Caro was going on again about TERFs being like the Nazis, and it's just crazy. This to me is indicative of the cracks that are beginning to appear in the gender movement, because people like Caro, who are trans activists, are doubling down on stuff, and they're grasping at straws by saying that, we are fascists and we are Nazis, when we're just asking reasonable questions of her, like, do you really think that male sex offenders belong in female prisons? And the response is, you're a Nazi.
Yeah, meant.
But, it's disheartening that these people have such a platform and that the mainstream media supports their views and just completely ignores us.
I always forget who Jane Caro is. Is she the Sex Party?
Yeah, she ran for the Sex Party.
Yeah.
What are they called now? Reason Party.
Oh, right. Yeah.
She didn't get in. Yeah, she didn't get in. Surprise. I mean, a feminist who thinks that men are women isn't really going to get very far. But
yeah. Your internet is quite jumpy today, Anne.
Oh, my internet's terrible. It's raining, and it's raining. Every time it rains, the internet goes out and the TV reception goes away.
Oh.
So while it's wonderful living in the urban fringe on a nice little farm, it's like living in the 80s, which is great. Yeah.
All right, well, we better wrap it up there. So any final thoughts?
I just want to thank everyone who came up to say hello to me after the event the other night and say, oh, we watch YouTube, or, oh, yeah, I follow you on Twitter. And there's so many women came up to me that I was a bit overwhelmed and a little bit embarrassed, actually, because I'm just, doing what I'm doing. But I just want to, if I was a bit rude or if I was a bit confused, because people come up to me like they know me and I just know them as an avatar. And I'm thinking, and they tell me their name and I'm trying to match it with the picture in my head of their Twitter handle or whatever, and I'll probably just stand there looking confused going, oh, thank you. It was actually really nice. And TERF stuff does take me, you know, it takes a lot of time and effort, and it takes me away from my kids, and it takes me away from my study, and takes me away from my work. And sometimes it can be really overwhelming, and, you know, I feel burdened by it. And then, you know, you have little moments like that where people come up and say, look, I really appreciate what you're trying to do. And it really means a lot to me. Yeah.
Hey,
and particularly following our YouTube. Yeah.
Quickly tell the Harriet Shing story from the other night.
Oh, no, that's all right. Keep that to myself. Yeah, but I did see Harriet Shing, and she hates my, yeah. If you could, we're trying to get 2,000 YouTube followers. So if you could give us a follow. I thought we were doing really well, but then I saw a pimple popper video the other night that had 21 million views. And I thought, we really need to get up there to 2,000. Because I think we're better viewing than a pimple popper video. So yeah, if you could share, like, follow, all that crap, that'd be great.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
Bye.